All right, I think we're live streaming now. Welcome everyone. This is the quality group conversation for the month of September, calendar year 2022. We provided an overview of the key review slides. We were using the key review slides as well. And we can go ahead and take questions from there. I don't see any questions, but I do want to highlight two key initiatives that we're doing. One is in slide 3. Another is in slide 6. So slide 3 is around increasing community contributions. One of the key efforts here is around leading organizations. And we have Nick here as well. Nick, do you want to highlight anything here on the work you're doing with the group on leading orgs?
Totally, I'd love to. A change that we recently added into the handbook in the code review guidelines is the concept of leading organizations. It's also an initiative that we're driving, and Liz Petoskey is the DRI for that, is to make sure that we get back as fast as we can to organizations that have a track record of contributing to GitLab. So these organizations get a review time objective, or like an SLO of 4 working days before, or like as a maximum, before they get an answer on their next step. Traditionally, this was a challenge to do this for community merge requests. So this is a way to recognize and give them this as a benefit of contributing a lot to GitLab. There's a bunch of other benefits that we're exploring towards these leading organizations, like some legal information or help, increased employer brand visibility, public recognition, and access to GitLab resources for that matter. We're interviewing quite a lot of customers if they would be interested in these benefits, but also customers that have already obtained this status today. So I'd love to explain more, but I'll leave to Mac for the second initiative. I'll share the links in the group conversation doc on everything I touched upon.
Cool, thanks for that, Nick. And the second one I want to highlight with success is the effort that Kyle and the engineering productivity team is doing on increasing pipeline efficiency. So mass traceability, time to first failure has been improved. That is in slide 6. And we're keying on urgency ahead of time because we're going to improve efficiency, and that with the team growth, we want to make sure our pipelines are in a relatively good state going into the next year. This is going to be a very short group conversation. Unless there are any other questions, feel free to take a look at the slides and ask any follow-up questions that you like. Oh, Artie has a question. Artie, would you like to vocalize and we help you take notes?
Sure. Thanks, Mac. So I was actually just curious because it's difficult to tell from slide 5 itself on your discussion topic number 2 for bug prioritization. The actions that you have for, like, I know you've like kind of separated them since last key review and what's being taken now. I am curious, like, whether these results, especially in the first half since the last key review, are these results that you have seen, and if so, like, kind of I'm curious if you have links, or if you can elaborate just a little bit more on like how big of a difference, or how like large of, or like how big of a difference in terms of like the result. Like you say, for example, in the first one, it provides sorry, in like the second one, you said it's provide an increased adoption rate. So that one has numbers, which is great. The third one, for example, says you've eliminated the need for manual intervention. And you did also make a note in the third column around learnings that it didn't apply across sections, but you didn't kind of, I was wondering if you could elaborate just a little bit more on, like, okay, well, how many sections are you talking about? Or like how large of the of what you looked at applied or didn't apply, that sort of thing?
That's a great question. We'll take it to add more resulting numbers in it next time. So right now the team is stretched pretty thin on bugs prioritization. We only have only a handful of quality engineering managers. So the load falls down on the SCT, the ICs to go and propose bug prioritization. With the counterparts that we're working with in discussion topic 2, there's automation that's in the works to nudge S1 bugs that are above SLOs. So they tag the engineering manager and also the SCTs automatically, and this automatically gets added into the team's backlog. So that removes the manual intervention. We hope that it's going to be fully automated, so it's less of a manual triage going forward for all the groups that we have the SCTs. So that's one thing. On the other part of the question that you see, I think we are measuring the adoption rate. So we want to see the teams being actively engaged and discussing what bugs to prioritize first in the release. I think the next one is 15.5 and then 15.6. So when the discussion happens and when automation comes at the back, it's more of a natural process, natural behavior going forward. Does that help with your question, Artie or Cynthia?
Yeah, I'm sorry if my question was not well formed.
Adi,
no,
if I may
that's-
jump in to add to what Meg just mentioned, you are completely right. We do not have data as to prove what kind of efforts we did to eliminate the malintervention to avoid having QEM and SCT at that. And that's a good metrics we could probably track for 15.6. We have total of 44 groups that we are within the engineering section. And if you look at it this time around, 33 of them engaged SCT counterparts. Out of which I would say, this is a purely ballpark number, I would say almost 4 or 5 groups do not have a planning issue. And when you don't have a planning issue, it's more about Slack conversations. There isn't easier way to automate that process. So the ones that do have a planning issue, we have added in the template itself a way to tag the right SCT or the right QEM. There are MRs for that. We could definitely pull that one up to see what is the percentage of intervention needed there. But for groups that don't have, it's more about Slack conversations, pinging on Slack, and that's also not very efficient because then you have to remember to ping your counterparts. So if there is a way to kind of formalize the planning process, this would also eliminate the need for a malintervention to tag all your quads. But to answer your initial question, I don't have the exact numbers. But does that help at all?
Yeah, no, that's great. Thanks.
Yeah, I think this is something great that we should provide in the next key review to get more numbers to the result that we have. Thanks for the feedback here.
All right, I think I have the next thing. I just want to say congratulations on having a high of 126 community contributions. I know y'all have been working really, really hard on that. So I just want to see, were there any that were particularly interesting? And then also, if you notice any kinds of trends in the types of MRs that community contributors are providing. Are they features? Are they fixes? Are they documentation?
It's a very good question. I tried to do some really quick SQL queries here while I saw that question. But in the slides, in the third slide, you can see increased contributors. There's investigated seasonality of contributors, where it links to an issue where we try to investigate, is there any trend that we see just because it's that month of the year? We didn't do any investigation in what kind of topics are people interested in. However, we do see a trend where there's when there's a hackathon, like there's a lot of small MRs and a lot of these, I wouldn't say quick fixes, but like pretty high interest from contributors. The downside of that is that the next month, those same people that are interested in the rewards of those hackathons, or that's what we assume, might not come back and wait for the next hackathon. So while 126 is a great number, we were almost certain that we would not get that same number the next month because the hackathon was not happening in the next month. in terms of features and bugs, I'd love to investigate a bit more there, and happy to provide you an answer later on. But it depends on the month. So August, in that sense, would be very different than September because of the fact that there is no hackathon.
Well, that makes perfect sense. So thank you for that.
Yeah.
And I wasn't trying to give you an action item. If it's useful to you to understand the trends, then cool. I'm just curious, but then if it's not useful to you, again, not
We
trying
do track it. So on the dashboards that we have, we do see a difference in like how many features were added within each stage. So for example, the manage stage had more feature MRs in August compared to maintenance. But if you do look at the create stage, there's actually more maintenance than features. To find the trends within the stages and within the types of these merge requests, that might be a bit difficult, but it might also make sense if we're looking for where do we see gaps, and should we market more to get more features in particular stages where we actually want to increase the velocity of innovation.
Yeah, that makes sense too. And you are the expert here, not me. So I'll leave it up to you. What's useful to you? Were there any that were just like, oh, this is a really cool contribution?
I don't know offhand. However, we do have the contributor of the month. So there's a voting that happens, and everyone is able to like chime in on what is like a really great contribution that happened. And then usually on every release post, there was one person being called out. That is being changed now to like also call out everyone that helped and like pick out one person that says, okay, but this was like the top-notch part. So if you'd like to know more like where it stands out, I defer to that release post instead of my own opinion in that sense.
Thank you for the question, Christy. I want to point out we do have a measure to measure the percentages of features being contributed from community contributions. Now, it doesn't mean that it's all features. There's also documentation related to new features and existing features. I do know that there's a lot of documentation submission from the community with the tech writing team helping us a lot here. That's something to keep in mind as well.
Cool, thank you.
Yeah, and to add to what Nick says, if you look at the chart for the wider community per month, the first month of the quarter is always a big spike, and you see a two-step down. It's because that is the hackathon month. The good news is that this is the highest we've seen, which I think it alludes to the process improvement that Nick has been leading, making sure the review time is fast, helps with the existing hackathon seasons. And I think in one of the charts in slide 14, you can see that the age of community contributions hasn't been increasing. Normally, we will see this starting to spike. And the backlog is also not spiking as well after the hackathon. So we are closing out merging MRs faster than before. Hopefully, we'll retain that trend as well. I don't see any other questions. Give it more time. If anybody has thoughts, feel free to ask on the fly. We can take notes for you. You don't have to review. You don't have to review the slides beforehand to ask any questions.
I'm curious with the last chart you just mentioned there, Mech, with the Open Community MRH. There seems to be a lot of dips in that one. What's causing them dips? Is that the hackathons as well? Is that us closing a lot of issues all at once?
Yeah, I think those dips are roughly correlated to when the hackathon starts or when there's an influx of new MRs, the age will dip down. But if you can see from the historical trend, its age is doing a lot better than before the past year or so.
It's a bit of a downside. Like if a hackathon like adds 100 new issues, obviously the median will move to a lower pace, but really quickly because you only have that small window to get that price. So that kind of creates that peak or that low dip.
Yeah, this is a great discussion. I think we might want to look at how the review efficiency is going on in community contributions, because if the age is low and we require things to be opened to get the age down, that's not the end behavior that we want, right? The end behavior that we want is to merge and close the AMRs fast in a timely manner. So that there is some downside of measuring the total age, because new bugs or new MRs is moving the metric in a positive way, but it's not actually closing out things. So we may need to look at another metric to measure things in parallel, making sure that we're closing out things efficiently. Thanks for the question, Sam. All right, I think that's a lot of awkward pauses already. Thank you everyone for participating. We have a few feedback to look into from all of your discussions. We'll see you in the next group conversation. Thank you.